money printing is fundamentally communist.
How do you feel about communists?
If there's any communists in the chat right now, which there must be, because I see some. Boy, I'm sorry, guys. I was a little distracted during Ben's rant because I saw some just. I'm sure they were well-intentioned takes on America.
I doubt it.
Somebody positive.
Chairs were being thrown.
That America wasn't the greatest country in the world, and then offered up New Zealand and Mexico. And it's like, how do you expect me to take it seriously, bro? Like,
just baiting, Walker. Just baiting.
Sure.
Just baiting.
Switzerland is the only first world country in the world. You want to know why? Because of their immigration policy. Look it up. I'm not going to do it for you. You'll be fascinated. You will never become a citizen of Switzerland. And that's why Switzerland is a great country. It's a fantastic country. They don't do the lame thing on their water bottles like the rest of the EU does. Anyway, printing money, centralized credit is fundamentally a communist idea. It was posited by Karl Marx as the 5th point in his 10 points in the Communist Manifesto, where he talks about the fact that the centralization of credit is essential to instituting a communist state. Now, a lot of people like,
we are.
It's the CIA.
Okay. Yeah.
Of course.
At least it's not the city of London.
Well, I was going to say with the city of London.
MI6.
Yeah.
We're getting.
So I want to go through this thing about gross domestic income. So a smaller piece of every US dollar earned in the economy is going to workers. The proportion of wages and salaries in the US gross domestic income, or GDI, is down to 43%, near the lowest since records began in 1929. Gross domestic income measures the total income earned across the economy, including wages, corporate profits, and investment income. The metric has been in a long-term decline since peaking at 52% in the 40s. By comparison, between the 40s and the 60s, this percentage never fell below 48%. In other words, a larger proportion of economic income is now flowing to corporate profits and investment income rather than paying workers. The gap between corporate profits and labor income keeps widening. Now, this is a thing that, and I'll bring up the next article in a moment, but this is the thing that a lot of people, they don't realize why this is happening. All they see is corporations making more money, companies bad, and that's just as deeply as they go. And so there's this article on over on Zero Hedge called "The Money Printers Fueling Socialism's Rise." And so here in the article, it says, during the last 3 decades, the national savings rate has essentially collapsed, having fallen from 6.3% of GDP in 1997 to 0.5% of GDP in 2025. Between the same 2 dates, however, the net worth of U.S. households, blue line, has soared from 4.6 times personal income to 6.5 times personal income. In economist jargon, the question would recur as follows. How in the world, over a 3-decade period, did the stock of wealth soar when the flows of savings virtually evaporated? Or in plain English, how did so many Americans get so damn rich while living high on the hog? And we do mean wealthy. According to the Fed's flow of funds data, household net worth erupted from 32 trillion in 97 to 169 trillion at present. These figures amount to an average of 320K per household in 97, which grew to an average of 1,250 or 1.25 billion per household. Million? No. Yeah, sorry, 1.25 million per household 28 years later. Needless to say, some substantial part of that gain is reflective in inflation, but even in constant 2025 dollars, average net worth per household has virtually doubled from about 630K to the aforementioned 1.25 mil. So when I chat about kind of this inability to save with people, in relation to inflation and companies being able to stock away more money. Again, it is downstream effect of the money printer. And I think of, the last people to kind of get their hands on newly printed money and to have any recourse on adjusting to the state of newly printed money are the blue collar workers, right? You're in a position where when you enter into an employment contract, you make an agreement saying my time, an hour of my time, based on my knowledge of what I can buy with $1 is worth the following amount. However, that number is almost instantly reneged upon because the amount of money grows. And so the purchasing power of your dollar dwindles and your understanding of what you can buy with your hourly wage dwindles more and more. And so it's up to you as the individual to then beg and plead with the employer, whose job is to be as profitable as possible, to beg for a pay increase to maintain your standard of living. The inverse is true in a system where the money is finite. You enter into an employment contract, your standard of living continues to go up at the same pay rate. Now, the employer is tasked with the idea of, is this person, with all of the advances of technology and our ability to produce more with less work, is this person still making enough? Or do I need to argue with them to decrease their wage, knowing that if I try to do that, they may leave and I may need to sink more money into training a replacement? It puts, I think, the power into the hands of the blue collar worker, and it tasks the company owner with figuring out that balance of, do I need to reduce wages? Do I keep somebody where they are? And yeah, I think it tips the scales in a better position. But this is the reality of it. Every company, they want to be as profitable as possible. It's in their best interest to leave wages be until there's a reason they need to raise them. And that's a lot easier to do that when there's this hidden tax of declining standard of living just because your money is able to purchase less. Anyways, end of rant there. I'm curious about your guys' take on this GDI and this article over on Zero Hedge about money printers fueling socialism's rise because people aren't looking deeper. So maybe I'll go to Brandon first. Yeah.
Oh, I just lost it. You guys hear me?
We got you. You're golden. You're good.
No, I was all up in the chat, but getting it on in there. So yeah, no, I think that's 100%, Ben. It's this world where, and that's why I was bringing this up earlier too. As I've been thinking about Gary Vaynerchuk and Alex Hormozi, and just to extrapolate that on a little bit more. You have a society, whether it's like the capitalist harder bro, we brought up Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, where you have these guys where you can't see it because you're like, well, hey, I'm good. Or it's the boomers, like someone mentioned earlier. I think it was Walker, somebody, like, you have this world where like they're passing down the wealth and these things are coming, and you can't see it. Like, it's very tough. You're like, well, you're telling me my whole life was a lie, and that's very hard for the average person to understand. You're like, well, I've got it pretty good, or I've done pretty well for myself. Or an Alex Hormozi or Vaynerchuk, who are in their 30s or 40s or 50s. I'm like, well, hey, I can make money in any era because I'm that good. I'm a unicorn or whatever. And then you have the younger generation where it's fascinating because there's so many of them where the answer is so easy that it's almost hard. Right? Like, wait, you're telling me it's that easy? Like, there's only 70 men at the Lexington Green that the shot heard around the world. There's only 70 of them, 3 million people. That's all it takes is to change the whole system. There's 8 billion people. There's only a couple thousand, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5,000 leaders in the world. And there's 8 billion of us. And it's that easy to just change the system. And it's the rationalization of human beings. And it's the not being connected at the right times where we think it's much harder than it is. And it doesn't have to be this way. That's why it's the wildest part. I think that's what Bitcoiners struggle with the most, right? And that's where toxic Bitcoin maximalism comes from in a lot of respects, where it's like, it's that easy. The Satoshi, I don't have time to explain it to you. Because it's like, if you're not going to help yourself, I can't help you. A lot of human beings don't want to help themselves at the end of the day. They want to rationalize everything. The misery loves company. They want to be in a world where they can be a victim. They can be in this place where people can just do things for them and they can just keep making excuses for themselves over and over again. Because like you said, Ben, I mean, it really is that simple. We're in a deflationary world, or I should say when money is neutral, that captures deflation and everyone gets wealthier. It is that easy, and it's actually very illogical, and it makes sense. But when you're in a world where you're in the bucket, you're in the frying pan or the pot, and you've been boiled your entire life, and you know no different, how do you really see it other than just touching the stove and just truly getting burned? Or you're seeing the Canadian truckers. You guys have lived it. You've actually been it. It's very easy then for someone to actually get it. But for someone who has privilege or people around the world that have the the megaphone, so to speak, where there's people in South America or Latin America or in Africa or people all over that don't have the megaphone, they don't have the bully pulpit, but they need it, they want it. The Nigerians, the Naira a few years ago, just saying, yeah, F off. 0.1% of the people said, yeah, I'll take your CBDC. They get it. But those people, unfortunately, even though there's a ton of them, don't have the bully pulpit. But that changes over time. And this goes back to what we said earlier and said many times. It's just pain mixed with time.
Yep, agreed. Walker, curious your thoughts there, buddy.
Yeah, money printing is fundamentally communist.
How do you feel about communists?
If there's any communists in the chat right now, which there must be, because I see some. Boy, I'm sorry, guys. I was a little distracted during Ben's rant because I saw some just. I'm sure they were well-intentioned takes on America.
I doubt it.
Somebody positive.
Chairs were being thrown.
That America wasn't the greatest country in the world, and then offered up New Zealand and Mexico. And it's like, how do you expect me to take it seriously, bro? Like,
just baiting, Walker. Just baiting.
Sure.
Just baiting.
Switzerland is the only first world country in the world. You want to know why? Because of their immigration policy. Look it up. I'm not going to do it for you. You'll be fascinated. You will never become a citizen of Switzerland. And that's why Switzerland is a great country. It's a fantastic country. They don't do the lame thing on their water bottles like the rest of the EU does. Anyway, printing money, centralized credit is fundamentally a communist idea. It was posited by Karl Marx as the 5th point in his 10 points in the Communist Manifesto, where he talks about the fact that the centralization of credit is essential to instituting a communist state. Now, a lot of people are like, oh, I don't know, shut the fuck up. I guarantee I've read the Communist Manifesto more than you have. Why? Because I like to know the mind of my enemy. And communists are our enemies. Why are communists our enemies? Because they advocate for an ideology that has resulted in the deaths of hundreds of millions of people. 100 million people dead because of communism on the lowball side, right? So if you're in the chat, I assume that somebody who thinks New Zealand is better than America must be a communist, just because, like, how else, But, like, you should really understand the fact that communism is probably the biggest threat that we face. Now, the thing is that, like, you can say, oh, well, America's fascist or whatever else. America's closer to socialism than it is to anything else right now. That's the reality. Like, you look at the amount of our tax dollars that go towards welfare, that go toward, like, that are literally just in these entitlements. This is why Lynn Alden to Brain Biter says nothing stops this train, because you can't stop paying for the entitlements. It's like our military budget is tiny. We spend more, like, people are like, well, if we stop spending on the military and we started spending on education, we spend more on education, you dumb fuck. Like, read a book or to read a tweet and you can figure this out. This is not complicated stuff. So yes, does money printing lead to socialism? Of course, because it's creating something out of nothing and promising people free shit. How do you promise people free shit? With money that was created out of nothing. That's what you do. This is what socialists do every time. And socialism is just a proxy for communism. It's a step along that path. You promise people free shit. We're gonna freeze the rents, and the grocery store prices, they won't be able to gouge you anymore on their 1% to 2% margins that they have right now, you dumb fucking idiot. Like, I'm speaking about Elizabeth Warren here specifically, but as she flies in her private jet. Anyway, socialism is bad because it leads to communism. Communism is bad because it leads to death. Money printing is bad because it creates a market distortion, much like tariffs, much like subsidies, much like any sort of government intervention. It creates a distortion in the market that would otherwise not be there. It otherwise distorts the free market of people making subjective value judgments trillions and trillions of times during a day, right? So yeah, does money printing lead to socialism? Absolutely. Because it's promising people something with something that's made out of nothing. And that's all socialism and communism are.
Walker, to your point. Yeah, Walker, to your point about the socialism and its effects. One great example is as soon as the government gets involved in anything, it gets worse. So let's look at education. Use the example, oh, we need to spend more money on education. As soon as the Department of Education was established, the US used to generally rank near the top for high school and college graduation rates. However, since then, it's fallen off a cliff, and like the reading levels of kids since the establishment of this have just gone completely out the fucking window. Like the state of education in the US. As soon as the government got their hands on it, it's trash. Sorry, go ahead, man.
The highest spend on public school education, you can Google this again. I'm not going to do the work for you. Look at the cities that spend the most per student on education, right? And they're not actually spending on the student, they're spending it on DEI administrators, right? Look at those cities. They're the lowest in terms of literacy rates in the country. Baltimore, Chicago, places like that. Maybe there are confounding factors. I don't know. But look at it. The data is very interesting. End of mini rant.
The reading thing is funny because there was a school of thought, this like new reading literacy doctrine that came in the 90s. You guys who are Americans will have to remind me what it is. Pinnell, I think, was the person who did it. And basically what they did was try to finesse the literacy numbers at the primary and maybe a little bit at the secondary level, basically telling kids to guess what words were based on the words they saw. And they stopped teaching phonics for a long time. And crazy. You can look that up. I think it's Sue Pinnell who was one of them. And then I can't remember who the other lady was, but like completely ridiculous. That's point number one. That's an aside. The thing about the shallowing out or the hollowing out of the American worker is not unique to America. It's happening everywhere. And I think it's happening for two reasons. Okay. Number one is you have immigration problems everywhere in the modern world, except for Switzerland, where now American workers have to lower their expectation for that hour of work because they're competing against all of Mogadishu for the labor, stacking oranges at the local Publix, where they didn't have to do that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. That it was in the 60s that the US put together this, idea that they would take it was professionals at the time from other non-European countries. Couple of significant points in that sentence. Okay, you can go back, like Walker says, Google it yourself and find out why that's a problem. And then the other thing that's noteworthy is that the slice of the pie as far as GDP, do you know what it doesn't account for? But it's another tax that we don't talk a lot about. And it's an interesting piece as to why this is all universal and happening in Canada, the US, European countries. It's healthcare costs being rerouted from people. And so whether that's your insurance, whether that's, Walker, I saw you getting into the pit a little while ago with somebody on insurance, whether it's in Canada, you're paying more and more for healthcare through your taxes, that money never comes to you. And so you never see that. You are down that money, you are down all those costs. And meanwhile, like you're trying to compete with everyone on the planet for work now. It is a difficult situation for the average, American Canadian. I'll add this point. This doesn't even account for something like AI yet. When you see something like, here in Canada, we just had Tiff Macklem, our central bank governor, say that the Canadian household is resilient as far as their spending. That is true, but only because the top 10% of households account for like 80% of household production. It's true Pareto, right? So when we talk about whether or not households have money, that's typically what you mean. Those people are making up for the sort of poorest households. If AI replaces 10% of knowledge work in Canada, I don't know what it's like in America, but if it replaces 10% of knowledge work in Canada, okay, and let's face it, that's probably a conservative estimate. That's like 1 in 10 lawyers, 1 in 10 social media people, 1 in 10 whatever, right? Our unemployment rate will jump to 10% overnight. And those people have no other skills. It doesn't matter how good you did in school, whether you have an MBA or, BCom or whatever, you can't lay a bead. And even if you could, you got to compete with Javier before you can go get that job in the factory.